Today it's been announced that the Sloshing Machine Neo is going to have Point Sensor and Trizooka. This kit is now significantly more viable to run Opening Gambit on, and will therefore be a top tier in competitive play, and nobody will ever run any other weapon ever again. The metagame is ruined. Okay, look, Nintendo, I have other content ideas. You can't just tweet out 3 kits in a single day like this. Some of these are going to be old news by the time I cover them, and I'm not going to be covering much else until I do. Inconsiderate. Anyway, the original Sloshing Machine kit is one of the most synergistic kits in all of Splatoon 3. The Fizzy Bomb controls space just the way the Sloshing Machine's main weapon wants to, while painting really well to make up for the Sloshing Machine's relatively weak paint output, and setting up multiple different flavors of damage combo with the main weapon. It's one of the best sub-weapons in the entire game, on the exact weapon that needs what it brings the most, in a game where the map design facilitates the resulting weapon's playstyle the best. The vanilla Sloshing Machine kit was so dominant that it was one of the only other weapons that stayed viable during crab meta, and it took a massive nerf to the main weapon for it to see less use in competitive play. Well, now the main weapon is massively nerfed. The fire rate decrease hurts its paint output even more than it already was by being a sloshing machine, and it stacks with the ink consumption nerf it had received earlier to make it so the weapon just has a lot of downtime, spending a long time waiting to be able to slosh again, even when it's not running out of ink. The first kit this weapon got was so good that it ruined the weapon for anything else that came afterward. Maybe. See, Trizooka got a hugely significant buff recently, and now everyone's running it. That's the one thing that makes me think twice about writing Sloshing Machine Neo off completely. There are already plenty of people willing to play Machine, and I can definitely see there being a team that wants Inkzuka, but doesn't have a weapon slot to spare on the team besides one that's being filled by their Slosher player, and they tell that player, hey, can you go Machine Neo so we have a Zuka? That said, I don't know that that idea is super well advised. I've maintained for a long time that Point Sensor is pretty solid in Splatoon 3, but Fizzy Bomb's Sloshing Machine was so unbelievably good that I'm honestly not sure whether a sloshing machine that's balanced around having it is worth playing without it. Sloshing Machine splats really slowly, so it wants to keep its opponents at arm's reach, but it's barely even got midline range, pretty much equivalent to a 52 gal. The Fizzy Bomb, a long-lasting sequence of explosions that softened an opponent up exactly to the specifications of the Sloshing Machine's damage values, bought the machine time to either do the damage it needed or back up to maintain range advantage against a frontliner pushing it. Even when its sub-weapon made it that much of a brick wall, the number one counter strategy to the weapon was already to rush it down with something like Tetradualies before it could get set up and do lethal damage. Now its sub-weapon is not a brick wall, but a vision cone in a quote-unquote stealth game that lets you run and gun if you're spotted, so is it really even a stealth game, let's be honest with ourselves. Sure, they'll see the opponent coming, but if they can't actually stop the opponent from approaching quickly, they probably just lose the engagement. The Sloshing Machine felt like it had way more range than it actually did because of that Fizzy Bomb, and without it, I'm not sure how effective this is really going to be at fighting a frontline weapon. It'll still be scary against backline weapons, only more so because it now has a special that's more of a jump scare for them than Booyah Bomb. But let's also talk about what it loses for not having Booyah Bomb, because that's also really important. Booyah Bomb is what FLC coined as a continuation special. The idea is that at top level, when you splat someone, 2 things are very likely to be true. 1, that you're damaged somewhat from that engagement, and 2, that an opposing player is rapidly approaching you to try and trade back for the opponent you splatted and mitigate their disadvantage state. Most weapons are going to get the splat and then need their teammates to follow up on that and relieve the pressure off them so they get the pick cleanly. Because otherwise it's just going to end up even, and that loses your team some time to use the power play you've created by splatting someone. If you have a Booyah Bomb though, instead of getting a splat and then having to retreat, you can get a splat and then be using a special to start an even more advantageous fight immediately, while armoring away the opponent's attempt to trade you back. The chances, once you've splatted one player and your team is with you and ready to push, that there are 2 other opposing players, because that's what it usually takes to shred a Booyah Bomb, close enough to be dealing the damage they need to shred your armor and splat you, are pretty slim. So you get to splat someone, pop a safe Booyah Bomb that's nevertheless in a very aggressive position, and you snowball that single pick into a massive momentum shift for your whole team. Trizooka can create offensive momentum, but it's not doing anything to protect the user before it does so. It'll require the player to position very passively before it takes its shots. Now, Sloshing Machine generally likes lingering in those kinds of positions anyway, so it's not a bad fit for the weapon at all, but it does lose that utility of functioning as an effective frontline weapon despite its slow time to splat, and that makes it a much slower, less versatile pick than the vanilla kit. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see this weapon in competitive play from time to time, but I would be a lot more surprised to see it become common in top-level play. It feels like a weapon it'll be easy to have someone flex onto as an improvisation to patch up a couple specific holes in a team comp, but on a practiced team that's going to sit down ahead of time and game plan, I don't think it becomes a core idea for a weapon to include in the team's main comp. It has to be a situation where you need specifically AoE damage rather than the superior DPS of a splatter shot, or even a squeezer, which also happens to outrange it, and a situation where point sensor is worth running over the shot's suction bomb, for example, and a situation where you have strong paint elsewhere on the comp to support its nerfed paint output. It's a substitute. Someone who can step in and make sure the students don't set fire to the classroom wastebasket, but not someone you can rely on to teach them lesson 7.3 out of your specific textbook after collecting and correcting the homework you wrote on lesson 7.2 and answering all the students' questions as they go. Valuable to have when you need it, but you hope not to need it very often, because while you will occasionally be surprised, it's generally not realistic to expect it to be the best option available for your particular situation.